Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex Van Houten, plus his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's Pretty Beast Mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 32 of Defining Dad Bod, where we're talking about protein. This episode's been sponsored by the Better Daily Group. We all have a cross to carry, but it's a little lighter when you don't do it alone. Work hard to become 1% better every single day with a community of people who are also walking toward betterment. Go to betterdaily.disciplemedia.com. The new app is coming out soon, and we'd love to make you a founding member. That's betterdaily.disciplemedia.com. Today's episode is a powerful one. I first published it about a year ago as we were tying up the TRUFIT series, and it was important to me to help folks understand how becoming conscious of their own macronutrient intake could be a powerful shift in their long-term health and fitness goals. In the past, I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to make the esoteric things of health and fitness exoteric, which means taking the things that are hard to understand and making them easy. And this episode's no different. Protein intake can be a potentially complicated subject, but once you understand the why and the how, it's actually very easy. In fact, I have a client I'm working with now whose only major nutrition focus in the past 8 weeks has been to improve her protein intake at breakfast. As a result of that focus, and an emphasis on going for a walk 4 times a week, she's lost 12 pounds of body fat and significantly improved her energy. I actually got a message from her yesterday that read, "Whoa, Alex, I just stepped on the scale and see that I've lost 12 pounds. I gotta say I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought this would be harder. And while there's a lot more that could be said about it, that in a nutshell is the power of protein. We'll get to the rest in just a second. First, if you haven't already, please go to your podcast app and leave us a 5-star raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. These reviews help me sleep at night, and they do a lot to put us at the top of the charts, which makes us more discoverable by people who are searching for answers. It only takes a minute, and it's a great way for you to give back if I've given you value in this show. And now our food for thought. My food for thought for you today comes from my latest module in my health coaching certification with the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. We just finished learning about the repercussions of childhood trauma on long-term health outcomes. There's a large body of research on the subject that I won't get deep into here. The short of it is, individuals who experience trauma in childhood are more likely to develop cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, substance dependence, and a myriad of other health issues than kiddos who didn't experience trauma in childhood. Well, this particular subject definitely warrants a future series on Defining Dad Bod. My food for thought for you today is a question. Has trauma in your childhood impacted your relationship with food at all? If so, how? And what are you doing about that? These are extremely hard questions in my experience that very few people are asking. And in my coaching practice with regard to nutrition, I find that while some progress can be made in manipulating some of the aspects of nutritional inputs and outputs, the heart of things like emotional eating or overconsumption of caffeine or alcohol, or even an intense sweet tooth, can oftentimes be positively impacted by taking steps to become aware of and positively address the traumatic experiences we've had in our lives. For instance, I've mentioned many times on this show that martial arts and exercise have been an outlet for me since I was a small child. I have an ACE score of 6 out of 10, which means while I didn't have it as bad as some kids I know, my childhood was no walk in the park. And while many of my friends who had similar experiences tried to cover up trauma with alcohol, erratic behavior, or sexual experiences, I found personal freedom in running, lifting, and other forms of activity. And while I've talked about the science of that process, how exercise helps to focus, calm, and quiet the mind on this show, I've not often made the connection between childhood trauma and nutrition habits. If childhood trauma has impacted your nutrition practice, whether you know about it or not, I'm sorry you've had to deal with that. It's not easy, and I wish you the best in navigating that obstacle. You're made of sterner stuff than you know, and while food can't fix the wrongs that were visited on you and your family, you're a different person now, and you have a choice. If it would be helpful to say it out loud to somebody, and maybe other people in your corner might raise an eyebrow strangely, you're welcome to shoot me a message at CoachL@definingdadbod.com. That's your food for thought today. I hope it gives you something to munch on. I know that's a heavy way to start a show, but real people are carrying heavy things, and it's silly not to talk about it. And speaking of carrying heavy things, let's talk about protein and its role in recovering and rebuilding you after enduring stress. Now, protein is a favorite training macronutrient for a number of reasons, and it forms the cornerstone of our macronutrient recommendations, which we'll talk about in the next episode of the TRUFIT series. But unlike carbs and fats, protein is not considered a primary energy source of the body. And so as we talk through the role of protein in the body, understand that we've shifted gears. And if we were to liken your body to a car, for instance, we've shifted from talking about fueling the engine to actually building the engine. And so things get pretty interesting here. So first, some simple facts you should know about proteins. When we talk about grams of protein in your diet, just like when we talk about grams of fats or grams of carbohydrates, we're actually simplifying a category that's much more complicated. Remember when we talked about carbohydrates and spoke specifically about grams of sugar versus grams of fiber? We talked about the relative impact on the microbiome or the changes that it might make to our blood sugar. And that sort of information is deeper than just how many grams of carbs I've eaten. Similarly with fats, we talked about things like the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which adds a little more color to the composition of your grams of fats than just the total number of grams of fats. Now with protein, when you eat something that has protein in it, you can see that it has 10 grams of protein or 12 grams of protein. But what does that really tell us? Well, proteins are the building blocks for the complex structure of living things. The enzymes that allow metabolic reactions to happen in your body, or plants and animals, are all built out of proteins. The connective tissue, like your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, even your bones, are constructed by long chains of complex proteins linked together. And then maybe most importantly, the DNA and RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, that make up the genetic material, the blueprints for telling your body what to do, are all built out of proteins. And so today I want to talk to you about the structure of a protein, the amino acids that make them up, and then talk about why protein is an important part of your long-term health and fitness journey, so that in our next episode, when we talk about calculating your macronutrient needs and modifying those needs based on your training program, you'll have a much better idea of where those numbers come from. So, proteins are the building blocks for the complex mechanisms and structures that allow life to go on. And that's true of both plants and animals. But what is a protein made of? Well, primarily, proteins are different from fats and carbohydrates because we've added one primary element to the structure of the molecules, and that is nitrogen. If you'll remember, fats are made up of primarily carbons and hydrogens, and there is an amazing amount of energy stored in a hydrocarbon, and so our body uses fats as a storage conduit for energy, as well as building the lipid bilayer around cells. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, add oxygen to that mix, and so they are a fantastic source of short-term energy because oxygen's built right into the molecule. The body isn't required to move oxygen to the cells in order to get at the energy that's trapped in a carbohydrate. So we have carbon, we have oxygen, we have hydrogen, and then amino acids add nitrogen, and some even add sulfur to the mix for extra credit. And the presence of nitrogen adds some rigidity to the molecules themselves. And so the body can actually use amino acids to chain together long, stable strands of molecules that can be used as building blocks. Imagine that you and your kiddo wanted to sit down to build an amazing Lego tower. And you open the box, and there are several different types of blocks in there. Some of them are long rectangles with 12 places to put different blocks on top of it. Some are smaller rectangles, and then you have a few that are those little squares. I don't know how things work in your house, but in our house, there's always a fight over who gets the big long ones, because we know we can build much cooler towers with the big long ones versus the small ones. But I digress. Imagine those are amino acids, nice and rigid, with several places where you can connect different things to them, and because they hold their shape and their form, you can build almost an infinite number of structures out of them. The variety and rigidity is important because there are so many structures within your body that are required to build out of those essential building blocks. So your body depends on the rigidity of the amino acids to build itself out of them. And this metaphor turns out really well, because you are basically built out of the Lego building blocks of amino acids. And there are exactly 21 amino acids that you're built out of. And when you look at a food label, and it tells you you have X grams of protein in this specific food, what it doesn't tell you is what collection of amino acids comprise that food. And this can be problematic for you because you need all 21 of those Lego blocks in order to create important structures in your body. Things get even more interesting when you consider that out of the 21 blocks that you need, the amino acids, there are 6 that you can build from scratch. There are another 6 that you can build a little bit of, but probably need to eat regularly. And then there are 9 that your body cannot build, and you are required to consume those in your diet, or you will be deficient and unable to build the structures you need to. And so this is where protein sources get really interesting. For our purposes here, I'm not going to focus on the 6 amino acids that you can build yourself. It's happening without your help, and unless you're very malnourished, it's unlikely that you're deficient in any of those amino acids. But for many of my clients, the emphasis on protein intake when we look at food journals on a regular basis emphasize getting enough of these essential amino acids into our diet. Those 9 essential amino acids are phenylalanine, valine, threonine, tryptophan, methionine, leucine, isoleucine, lysine, and histidine. I hope you wrote those down. There will be a quiz right after this. Now I can almost hear you saying, wow, Alex, that's a lot to keep track of. Can't I just go back to counting my protein grams? That's a great question. And the answer is yes. You will get these essential amino acids if you are consuming enough what we call complete proteins. Now, if you're not squeamish about consuming animal products, then getting complete proteins is actually not that difficult. If your protein sources include dairy, eggs, fish, beef, chicken, pork, and even bivalves like oysters, mussels, and clams, then you're not going to have a very hard time getting enough of these essential amino acids in your diet. It makes sense, right? If you need these amino acids, then other living things also need these amino acids. And animal products are almost always a complete protein source with regard to these essential amino acids. Where things get interesting and difficult is when there's a restriction on dietary habits with regard to animal products. Let's say you're allergic to eggs, for instance. Eggs are one of my favorite sources of complete proteins to recommend to my clients. But if you take those out of the equation, then the question becomes, what are some other good sources of complete proteins? Similarly, I have clients who hate the taste of fish, which is frustrating for me as a professional who's trying to get omega-3 fatty acids into people while maintaining a decent source of lean proteins. So if I have a client who's unable to eat eggs because they're allergic and who's unwilling to eat fish because they don't like the taste, then we've eliminated 2 fantastic sources of complete proteins and are going to have to find some alternatives. The basic point I'm hoping to make for you here, though, is that getting enough protein in your day is extremely important, especially because there are essential amino acids that your body works really hard to build itself out of and that you can't make yourself. Imagine if you started exercising really hard. You're pushing the envelope on your deadlift. You're doing a few more intervals than usual. You increase the incline on your treadmill. And you really tax the cells in your body hard. And you say, hey, you're not strong enough yet. And you unlock a part of your genetic material that says, all right, we got to get stronger. We've got to increase our mitochondria around here. We've got to increase the density of our ligaments and tendons. We've got to output more ATP. Turn on the factories. And so your cells get to work trying to code for new proteins to build new structures and to unlock a better part of you. The problem is, the stress of the cellular adaptation is only part of it, you exercising hard. But if you don't provide your body with the essential amino acids required to build those structures, then what you've done is you've stressed the system out without giving it the materials required to build a better version of you. And I see this happen very frequently as a professional. Many clients will start exercising regularly. They'll feel hungrier because their body's asking for additional nutrients. But when you're hungrier, you don't generally picture high-protein foods to add to your regimen. And so clients tend to consume more calories when they exercise, but not necessarily increase their protein intake because of their exercise. And so they're giving their body more fuel for exercise, but they're not giving their body more building blocks to improve the condition of the tissues and cells because of the exercise adaptations. The net effect? They feel a little more energetic, they see some results, but they plateau quickly and their workout progress stops in its tracks. Many times, they end up injured, frustrated, and demotivated because of the lack of results and the overall breakdown their body feels because of the added stress without the added building blocks. As a trainer, this hurts me inside because it's a relatively easy fix. Track your protein for a couple weeks. Work to increase your protein intake with complete protein sources, and boom, you're back in business. Your body has the building blocks it needs, those essential amino acids, to build better tissues. You see a metabolic uptick because of those metabolically active tissues. And your hunger is satiated because you're actually feeding your body what it needs to improve itself. And so your adaptations can continue. You get faster, you get stronger, you get leaner, and everybody's happy, right? And then from a caloric perspective, which we'll talk about more next week when we talk about how to build your own macronutrient profile, you get a slight benefit because protein, that is the amino acids you're consuming, require a lot more energy to process digestively than fats or carbohydrates. This effect is called the thermic effect of food. And also imagine somebody's gone through the trouble of making sure that there are 200 calories of each food sitting in front of you. 200 calories of butter on the left, 200 calories of oatmeal in the middle, and 200 calories of sardines on the right. The question is, how many of those calories from each of those foods are actually available to your body after digestion? The answer is, calories from fat tend to transfer very quickly, easily, and efficiently. Almost every calorie from butter ends up being able to be used as energy. It doesn't take much energy to process it. Similarly, almost every calorie from the bowl of oatmeal in front of you is going to be used as energy in your body. Just like butter, it doesn't take much energy to digest carbohydrates, and they transfer very efficiently to the bloodstream. But that's not the story with sardines. The energy required from your body to break down the proteins into its constituent amino acids, and then transfer those to the bloodstream, and then shuttle them to the cells to be used to build other things, is actually a very energy inefficient process. And so, diets higher in protein compared to carbohydrates and fats tend to require a lot more energy or calories from the body's metabolism in order to process well. This means for many people who I've worked with in the past, if they made no other changes to their diet at all, except to increase their protein intake in relation to their carbohydrates and fats, then they would see better body composition results, they'd see weight loss, and because protein is so satiating, oftentimes they'd see an overall decrease in total caloric consumption. This means that an argument can easily be made that if you've plateaued on your long-term health and fitness journey, especially in relationship to athletic performance or body composition goals, then when you're hungry, reach for a protein source first, because pound for pound, protein is going to be your biggest bang for your buck to fuel cellular adaptations, to build your body well, and not to contribute excessive amounts of calories to your life. Now, so far, I've said a lot of things. A quick recap. Proteins are the building blocks of all of the complex living compounds required for plants and animals. Enzymes, connective tissue, DNA and RNA, all of those things are built by chaining amino acids together to make new proteins in your body. There are 21 amino acids. You could think of those as the building blocks that create proteins, and 9 of those cannot be created by your body and therefore must be consumed in your nutrient profile. And interestingly enough, many people have stumbled upon better body composition by simply improving their protein intake, because protein digestion and utilization is much less efficient than fat and carbohydrate digestion and utilization. That is, protein's much less likely to be stored as fat on your body than the other two macronutrients. Unless there are restrictions on your diet, getting complete protein sources is relatively easy today. Eggs and fish are my favorite recommendations to make to clients for the most part, specifically those high omega-3 fish, like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. But protein comes just as easily and just as completely from other animal products as well. Beef, chicken, turkey, pork, other wild game, and heck, even crickets are all complete protein sources. But if you do have restrictions on your diet, it's important to make sure that the 9 essential amino acids are still a part of your diet. And if you have special considerations around your diet, either because of a food sensitivity, a disease, or a lifestyle conviction, we'd love to help you balance that out. You can reach out at Coach Al at definingdadbod.com. And that also goes for you who might be wrestling with kidney disease, liver disease, or gout. The rest of what I'm about to say here on the show does not apply to you if you have restrictions on your protein intake. So now you have a rough idea of what protein does in the body and some important considerations about complete proteins. So how much should you eat? It turns out that protein is my favorite macronutrient because in conjunction with your training program, it's a fantastic linchpin to inform how many carbs and fats you should also be eating. To make a very complex answer simple, if you're exercising regularly and you don't have any medical obstacles, then you should be consuming 1 gram of protein for every pound of lean body mass on you. Now, the research on this subject varies. The essential recommendation from the American Dietetic Association is 0.5 grams of protein per pound per person. So if I'm a 160-pound man, that means I should be consuming about 80 grams of protein at the very minimum, according to the ADA. Some recommendations go even lower than that. But when you look at the sports literature, the protein needs of a person go up as they engage in different sorts of activities. The higher intensity of the activity, the higher the protein recommendation goes. If you're involved in cardiovascular exercise, for instance, like cycling, running, or swimming, then protein recommendations come up to about 0.8 grams of protein per pound of mass. So as a 160-pound man, that brings my protein recommendation to 128 grams per day. Why does your protein need go up when you exercise? Partially because you have more lean body mass to support your activity. And remember, the lean body mass is constructed from protein. But the other thing that's important to note is that protein is required to recover from cellular damage. Exercise is the good stress after all. And when you engage in exercise regularly, you are damaging your cells and then asking them to rebuild themselves stronger next time. Now that's a gross oversimplification of biological adaptation, but I think you get the picture. The harder and more intense your exercise, the more protein you need. And so that brings me to the higher protein recommendations. If you're engaging in weight training very regularly, that is 3 to 5 days per week, especially if it's heavy, high intensity, or high volume, then your protein recommendations go pretty high. In fact, for things like sprinting, powerlifting, or CrossFit, sports recommendations for protein get all the way up to about 2 grams per pound of body weight. So for a 160-pound man, that's 320 grams of protein. Quite the range, isn't it? If I'm not exercising, 80 grams of protein according to the American Dietetic Association, and if I'm kicking my butt regularly, 320 grams, or at least up to that, according to some of the sports research. So how do you know how much you should be eating? And here's where the rubber meets the road. In my practice as a personal trainer, the average person I work with is not interested in working out 10 to 15 hours per week. At most, they're probably about 5 to 8 hours per week. And there's a steady mix of cardiovascular exercise and resistance training. Additionally, most people that I work with are trying to gain or maintain muscle tissue while burning, or at least not gaining, fat mass. And so a fantastic, middle-of-the-road, starting recommendation for protein intake is 1 gram of protein for every pound of lean body mass. The calculation's just a little more complicated, but if you'll hang with me for just a second, I think it'll make sense to you. Note, thus far, we've been talking about certain grams of protein per pound of mass. That's mass total. But pounds of lean body mass take into account how many pounds of a person is probably fat pounds. So I've been using a 160-pound man for my recommendations thus far. We'll keep doing that. Let's say we have a 160-pound man who's 10% body fat. That means 16 of his 160 pounds are body fat. So how much lean mass is on this guy? So 160 minus 16 is 144 pounds of lean mass. And so a great starting recommendation for how many grams of protein this man needs in a day, if he's exercising regularly, not too intensely, but also not sedentary, is to get at least 144 grams of protein per day. And in my practice, if I don't know anything else about the person, that's our starting point. After a couple weeks, if our digestive system's happy with us, if we're growing some muscle tissue, if we're losing fat tissue, and all things elsewise are maintainable, then we keep that recommendation until we need to change it. But what I like about the recommendation is that it grows with your muscle mass, which is what you would expect your protein needs to do as you grow muscle mass. That's especially important if you're 300 pounds and you're trying to lose 100 pounds. Your protein needs should actually increase as you gain mass, even though increasing your muscle mass will probably decrease your fat mass. I've worked with people who started with their protein intake at 100 grams, but because they lost so much weight, they were dropping their protein intake, which was not good for their metabolic tissue. Don't be that guy. Now, I've said a lot of things. Let's recap and make sure your head's not spinning. Protein is, in my opinion, the most important macronutrient because 1, it's the building blocks for all of the essential compounds that make up life in your body. 2, from an energetic perspective, protein is the least likely macronutrient you can consume that will turn into fat on your body. And 3, because of these things, and the protein requirement of metabolic tissues in your body to recover, protein is the linchpin for any macronutrient recommendation that somebody can give you. And unless there's a medical obstacle that you're wrestling with, like kidney disease, liver disease, or gout, then more high-quality protein in your diet is usually better. Now personally, I'm really looking forward to the next episode of the TRUFIT series, where I help you understand how protein, carbohydrates, and fats can be used in the big picture to help you get better adaptations from your workout program and to pursue your health and fitness for the long haul. Until then, though, I hope you understand carbs, fats, and proteins better. They're not just a number in grams. There's a lot more to it than that. And I hope by understanding these things, you can improve both the quality of your food and make the best use of your quantity. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names. The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of Better Daily. If this episode has been helpful to you, share it with someone in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. Finally, if you're struggling for betterment, don't do it alone. We all have a cross to carry, and it's lighter when we do it together. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily to get supported, challenged, and inspired to take yourself to the next level. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily today. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily. The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of Better Daily. If this episode has been helpful to you, share it with someone in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. Finally, if you're struggling for betterment, don't do it alone. We all have a cross to carry, and it's lighter when we do it together. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily to get supported, challenged, and inspired to take yourself to the next level. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily today. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily.